Some stories are just too dark to ignore, and when the ones meant to protect end up doing the unthinkable, it shakes you to your core. We've all heard about messed up things happening in the world, but nothing hits harder than when a child's life is taken by the very people who were supposed to love them most, their own parents. This isn't just about crime, it's about betrayal at the deepest level. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most disturbing and heartbreaking cases where innocent kids lost their lives at the hands of their parents. It was 2024 in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, a quiet evening that should have ended like any other. A family of 3 returned home after dinner, unaware their world was about to be shattered in the most unthinkable way. Jiao, the father, had been drinking earlier that night. Nothing unusual, just a few drinks or so it seemed, but sometimes it only takes one wrong moment, one careless decision to change everything. While his wife, Wang Hang, went about the house tending to chores, she left their 6-month-old daughter in Jiao's care. The baby cried and cried, but Jiao, half lost in his drunken haze, didn't move. Frustrated and exhausted, Hang snapped at him, and suddenly, things escalated. Words flew, anger flared. In the heat of the argument, Jiao stood up, cradling the baby in his arms. Maybe he was trying to prove a point. Maybe he was just trying to calm her. We'll never really know. But what happened next, no one could have prepared for. As he rocked his daughter gently near the living room window, 6 floors above the ground, his grip faltered, just for a second. But that second was enough. In a horrifying instant, the baby slipped from his arms and vanished out the window. Everything stopped. Hang screamed and bolted for the stairs. She found her daughter lying motionless on the cold pavement below. Jiao, now sobering fast in a state of pure panic, rushed down, scooped the tiny broken body into his arms, and sped toward the nearest hospital. But it was too late. Doctors tried, but there was nothing they could do. She was gone, declared dead on arrival. Hospital staff immediately notified the authorities. When police arrived, Hang accused Jiao of killing their daughter on purpose. She was grief-stricken, furious, maybe even in shock. Jiao was arrested on the spot, facing serious criminal charges. But as the investigation unfolded, the story took a twist. Jiao swore it was an accident. He said his hands were slick, unsteady, that he'd never meant to harm his child. He had no reason to lie. Earlier that very day, he had gone out and bought toys for her, and despite her earlier accusations, Hang later defended him. She told investigators he was often drunk, yes, but always tender with their daughter. After careful review, the court didn't find evidence of intent. His actions, though reckless and devastating, weren't driven by malice. The fact that he rushed her to the hospital, sobbing and desperate, told a story of a father in panic, not a killer. His charge was reduced. Instead of murder, he was convicted of manslaughter. The sentence, 4 years in prison. The verdict divided the public. Some were furious. How could 4 years possibly be enough for a man whose negligence killed his own child? They demanded harsher punishment, real accountability. Others saw it differently. They looked at Jiao as a broken man, already living a nightmare, haunted by the sound of that fall and the silence that followed. What more could the system do that life hadn't already done? But this wasn't an isolated tragedy. In recent years, similar stories have surfaced across China. In 2021, a 3-year-old girl died after being left alone in a hot car for 5 hours. No charges were filed. In another case, a father briefly left his 4-year-old daughter by the sea while he returned to his car. The waves swept her away. Her body wasn't found for 2 weeks. Again, no legal punishment. Zhao's case reopened a painful debate. What does justice look like when grief and guilt collide with responsibility and law? Legal experts like Zhang Xinan argued that children aren't property. They aren't disposable, and when a parent's negligence costs a child their life, there must be real consequences, not just sorrow and regret. The question lingers like a shadow over Jiao's sentence. Was it enough? Could any punishment ever measure up to the loss of an innocent child? Or was this simply one of those stories that reminds us how fragile life is? How one mistake, one drink, one outburst can destroy everything in the blink of an eye? There are no easy answers. Only a shattered family, an empty crib, and a haunting silence where a baby's laughter once lived. It was the evening of June 5, 2024, in Darlington County, Durham, a night that began with laughter, warmth, and the smell of home-cooked spaghetti. The Vickers family, Simon, his partner Sarah, and their 14-year-old daughter Scarlett, were all in the kitchen together just like any ordinary family winding down for the night. Sarah stirred the pot while Simon and Scarlett playfully tossed random objects at each other, their laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls. It was the kind of simple, silly moment you'd never expect to turn into a tragedy. But something changed. By 11 p.m., flashing blue lights lit up Geneva Road. Emergency services were rushing toward a scene they never wanted to see. Inside that same kitchen, now quiet and soaked in shock, Scarlett lay on the floor with a deep wound in her chest. Paramedics fought to save her, but her injuries were too severe. The 14-year-old girl, full of life just minutes before, was gone. Simon Vickers told police it was a terrible, horrible accident. He said they were joking around, just playing. And somehow, in the middle of it all, he threw a knife. He didn't mean to hurt her. He didn't even realize what would happen. That's what he claimed. But something didn't add up. Scarlett's wound was clean, deep, 11 centimeters straight into her heart. Forensic pathologist Dr. Jennifer Bolton didn't mince words. This wasn't the kind of injury a thrown knife would make. It was too precise, too deliberate. The blade had pierced her pajama top, sliced through a lung, and hit her heart. The kind of damage that only happens when a knife is held with force, not tossed playfully. Simon admitted he'd had 4 glasses of wine that evening. He'd also smoked cannabis. Still, he insisted, no malice, no intent. Just a tragic mistake. Sarah, her voice cracking under the weight of grief, backed him, said it was just roughhousing gone wrong. But the science told another story. Forensic scientist Gemma Escott examined the knife, and what she found pointed to something darker. The wound didn't match Simon's version of events. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a joke gone wrong. It was a stabbing. At trial, Simon stuck to his story. He painted that night as lighthearted, normal. He said he loved Scarlett more than anything in the world. But the prosecution hammered down piece by piece, showing how the evidence contradicted everything he said. Scarlett's final hours were normal. She even posted a TikTok just before it all happened. Smiling in her mirror, she captioned it, "Ignore the mess, please." No one knew it would be her last post. The jury took 13 hours. When the verdict came, it hit like a punch to the gut. Guilty. His version of events was rejected. The court believed what the evidence had shown all along. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. Simon Vickers was sentenced to life in prison, but the question still lingers. Why? There were no signs, no history of violence, no whispers of family trouble, not a single red flag that might have warned what was coming. Detective Superintendent Craig Rudd said it best. Only Simon knows what really happened in that moment. And maybe he'll never say. Scarlett's mother, Sarah, was left in ruins. In a quiet, devastating statement, she said her grief felt unreal. She couldn't understand how her world had shattered in seconds, her only child gone. The community mourned. Friends, classmates, teachers, everyone who knew Scarlett remembered her as kind, respectful, full of promise. A life filled with potential, ripped away in a flash. It was April 25, 2017, in the quiet town of Myerstown, Pennsylvania. A calm night turned into a scene no parent ever wants to face. In a house filled with the chaos and laughter of toddlers, something irreversible had happened. Ian Francis Dwyer was found lifeless in his crib, and the truth behind his death would break hearts and ignite outrage. Born on Christmas Day in 2014, Ian arrived alongside his identical twin sisters, Avery and Ciela. The triplets came a little early, and while Ian needed some help breathing at first, he quickly grew strong enough to go home. His parents, Justin Dwyer and Courtney Stash, were overjoyed. 3 tiny bundles of life all at once. A dream, but also a storm of exhaustion, noise, and sleepless nights. And Ian, he was clever, adventurous, a toddler with a spark in his eye. He kept climbing out of his crib, over and over again. No matter how they adjusted things, no matter how much they scolded or pleaded, he'd find a way out. They feared he might hurt himself in the process. But instead of seeking safer solutions, like switching to a toddler bed or asking for help, Justin and Courtney made a decision that would haunt them forever. They trapped him. That night, desperate to keep Ian inside the crib, they placed a mattress over the top, then used bungee cords to hold it down. As if that wasn't enough, they stacked 50-pound bags of rock salt on top of it to make sure it stayed. The idea was to protect him, but what they'd done was build a cage, a deadly one. Sometime during the night, Ian tried once more to climb out, but this time he didn't make it. The mattress, heavy and unyielding, collapsed under the weight of the rock salt. It pinned him inside. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't call for help. He died alone in the dark, in the very crib meant to keep him safe. By the time his parents found him, it was already too late. They called 911, but the silence that followed told the whole story. At first, they didn't tell authorities about the mattress. They didn't mention the cords, or the rock salt, or the desperate logic behind their fatal mistake. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and it came from a child. Ian's 8-year-old half-brother spoke up. He told investigators what he'd seen, what he'd overheard, that his parents had rigged the crib, that they'd talked about how the mattress had suffocated his little brother. Soon, everything unraveled. An autopsy confirmed what many feared. Ian died of suffocation, slowly, helplessly. Not because of illness or accident, but because of a reckless choice made out of fear and frustration. Justin and Courtney had been so focused on control, on stopping the escape, that they ignored the danger they were creating. They were arrested, charged with involuntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. Prosecutors didn't hold back. They argued that their actions weren't just careless, they were deadly, and the evidence agreed. What if they'd just moved him to a toddler bed? What if they had asked for help, called a pediatrician, anything but this? Would Ian still be here, laughing, eating, growing? Could one moment of pause have changed everything? Now, instead of bedtime routines and storybooks, this family lives with unbearable silence. The loss of a child is crushing, but knowing it could have been prevented, that's a different kind of grief, one that never lets go. It was a quiet Saturday night in Nashville, Tennessee. Inside the Radley home, everything changed after 9:58 p.m. That was when a panicked 911 call pierced the stillness. Deanne Radley's voice trembled on the line. A split second, a sound, a scream, the echo of a gunshot, and her world had changed. Her daughter, 13-year-old Diara Radley, was lying on the floor. Blood pooled around her. Deanne's hands shook as she dropped the phone, fell to her knees, and tried to undo the moment that had just unfolded before her eyes. She hadn't even seen the gun at first. It had been buried in her purse, wedged between makeup, receipts, and her keys. A .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol, loaded and unholstered. She was just digging for her keys. That's all. Then came the crack of the gunshot, the scream, the blood. Diara was right beside her, and in one tragic instant she was gone. First, responders rushed to the scene and tried everything to save her, but the wound was too severe. She was taken to Vanderbilt's pediatric emergency room. She didn't make it. The horror of what had happened settled into Deanne like a weight she couldn't lift. Later, she would tell reporters that she didn't even know the gun was loaded, that she had never imagined something like this could happen. But now the unimaginable had become her reality. She turned to social media, her grief pouring out in raw, unfiltered pain. "I lost my baby," she wrote. Words can't describe it. In one heart-wrenching video, she sat in the back seat of a car, her cheeks streaked with tears. Her voice broke again and again as she spoke to the camera, not for sympathy, but from a place of sorrow so deep it barely had words. "I want her back," she whispered. "I just want her back." The Radley family wasn't prepared for this. Deanne started a GoFundMe to help with the costs, explaining that Diara had been accidentally shot and she didn't have insurance for burial expenses. She thanked those who gave anything, because in moments like this, every bit of kindness feels like a lifeline. By Monday, only a few $100s had been raised toward their $15,000 goal. The grief was heavy, unrelenting. Deanne tried to make sense of it in news interviews, but how do you explain something like this? How do you say, "I killed my daughter by mistake"? She told the world her heart was broken in a million pieces, that she felt empty, that no parent should ever bury their child, and that no one can understand the pain until they've lived it. And Diarra? She was so much more than a headline. She had an angelic voice, the kind that lingered in a room after she left it. She loved to dance, to make her friends laugh, to sing like no one was listening. She cared deeply for her family. She loved school. Her presence was a light, and now that light had been extinguished far too soon. A gun, unholstered, a moment of carelessness, a split-second decision that can't be undone. As the investigation continues, the Nashville Police Department's Youth Services Division is looking into every detail. As of now, no charges have been filed. But even if they are, there's no punishment worse than what Deanne is already living with. It was a quiet Monday morning in 2019. At the links at Sleepy Ridge Golf Course in Orem, Utah, the sky stretched wide, the greens freshly cut, and the world felt peaceful. That morning, 6-year-old Aria Hill was where she loved to be most, riding in a golf cart, laughing beside her dad. Golfing was their thing, just her and her father, Kellen Hill. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The swing was clean. It was supposed to be just another stroke, but something went wrong. The ball veered, unpredictable, merciless. It struck Aria in the back of her neck, at the most delicate place, the base of her skull. There was no time to understand what had happened. Kellen dropped his club. A scream rang out. The world around them, the silence, the morning sun, the trimmed grass, collapsed into panic. Emergency services were called at 10:25 a.m. Paramedics arrived quickly, but Aria was already slipping away. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, then airlifted to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City. Her family clung to hope, praying, pacing, willing her to fight. But by 9:25 that evening, Aria was gone. The blow had been too severe. Her father's hands, once steady and sure, now shook uncontrollably. How do you live with something like that? How do you forgive yourself for something you never meant to do? Aria's uncle, David Smith, stepped forward to speak when Kellen and his wife Tasha couldn't. His voice cracked as he described Aria. Silly, spunky, the kind of kid who lit up every room she entered. She loved to play dress-up, to experiment with her mother's makeup, to boss around her younger brothers in the most loving way. Tasha later wrote through her tears on the GoFundMe page that Aria was creative, unique, and full of love. She said Aria's absence left a hole that could never be filled. The home was quieter now, unbearably so. Police ruled it an accident. No foul play, no negligence, just a moment that should have passed without consequence but instead carved a scar through the heart of a family. Lieutenant Trent College from the Orem Police Department called it what it was, a devastating tragedy. The golf course had never seen anything like it. Stephen Murray, the head golf pro, said that most golf balls never land anywhere near people. This was a freak incident, a rare, cruel twist of fate. The community didn't wait. Donations poured in, over $112,000 raised in days. People who had never met Aria offered words of comfort, prayers, and warm memories of their own children. Everyone wanted to help, to ease even a fraction of the unbearable weight the Hill family now carried. Aria's uncle, David, shared more about her in those long days of mourning. He spoke about her joy, how she had a way of making people feel seen, how her laughter made the walls of their home feel alive. She was a little girl, he said softly, but she had a big girl's heart. Her story is one that should never have been written. A story of a beautiful little girl, lost in a moment no one could have predicted. A moment that tore a hole in time, and yet her memory endures. Because love like Aria's doesn't disappear. It lingers, in the wind on a golf course, in the echo of a child's laughter, in the tearful whisper of a mother remembering the way her daughter called her name. She may be gone, but she is not forgotten.